Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Zenon Musmulas. I'm from GRNet. I have stepped in for Karl Vich, who, as you all probably know by now, is sick and could not make it to TNC this year. This session is about a number of different aspects related to IT service management, provisioning, monitoring, and all different aspects related to that. We have 4 presentations and not enough time, so I would like to start with the first presenter, who is, excuse me if I don't spell the name correctly, it's Pekka Kakipuro. Hi. So the first presentation is about benchmarking, a benchmarking effort about UNIS and higher education IT services. Can we switch the slides?
Yeah, please do so. Okay, good afternoon from my side as well. So, yeah, that's my presentation. Okay, thanks. Thank you for the introduction, and you pronounced well my name, so at least that part went well. So, my name is Pekka Kakipuro, and I'm actually having 2 hats here today. I'm the director of IT in Aalto University in Finland, and then I'm also a board member in UNIS, which is a European university IT organization. And my presentation is about UNIS first, a few slides about that, and then I will dive deeper into benchmarking across universities, how we are doing it, and how we are proposing to proceed in the years to come. So, first, a few words about UNIS. UNIS is a network of institutions. By the way, who knows what is UNIS from here? Okay, so some of you do and some of you don't, so it makes sense to go briefly through this part as well. So it's a network of institutions and people, I would say, and the common idea for us within UNIS is higher education, IT, and this in particular within the European context. The organization was founded in '93, and it is a non-profit organization, but we have both higher education and corporate members, so companies interested in being part of the community. Also, we have some, well, more exotic examples like consortiums that are combining several universities within a few countries, like in Italy we have Cineca, and in Spain we have Sigma, and so on. For more information and for joining, you can of course go to the UNIS website. And what we are doing, this is a brief slide about our key activities. We are doing other things as well, but here are the most important or most interesting ones. Every year we have an annual conference. This year it's going to be in Portugal. You are all invited if you feel interested in it. And we have also specific conferences and workshops. For example, this week we are going to have a rector conference in Prague where we invite rectors, presidents, vice rectors, vice presidents from universities all over Europe. And we have a number of active task forces. Here you have 4 of them. RS3G, strange name, but the idea here is to exchange student information across universities, even across countries. And the idea here is to, of course, create standards and ways of doing it in a reliable and trustworthy way. We have e-learning task force, which speaks for itself. Business intelligence task force, one of the most recent ones. And then Bencheit, which is the topic of this presentation. And Bencheit is something that started about 1.5 years ago, so it's recently new, relatively new, and of course it's still growing, if you wish. And of course, on top of the events and task forces, we are having mailing lists, websites, actually several of them, newsletters, Twitter feeds, and so on. Okay, that was UNIS. And then moving on to Bencheit, which is the actual topic of the presentation. Here the idea is to be able to compare university IT spending, technologies, people, everything across countries, across universities, and to understand where each one of us stands amongst our peers. So, what is Bencheit? It's an activity to compare IT metrics. Well, this is a very simple definition, but the history maybe gives you a bit more details. Initially, it started in Finland 1.5 years ago to collect 2010 data. We are having roughly 30, almost 40 universities within the country, if you count also the universities of applied science, and 33 of them participated in the survey. And it was really a success. We were able to really understand how our IT is being conducted in different places, what are the differences, what are the similarities. And therefore, this year we decided to open it to international pilot customers or pilot universities. We have roughly 5 of them participating. And also we are planning to implement this to a broader audience next year, so that we would be having, probably not open to everyone still next year, but still we would be having relatively big amount of people, organizations participating from outside Finland. The idea is actually not to be Finnish at all, and therefore once we found out that this was very useful, we wanted to open this up as a UNIS task force, and this way to collect information, to collect people, and to collect organizations from elsewhere in Europe as well. Currently, the way we are working is as follows. In the beginning, well, not really in the beginning, but in February roughly, universities and also other organizations that participate. They don't have to be universities, because in our case we have also these universities of applied science, but universities provide their key data in an Excel sheet. It is a complex sheet, but on the other hand we also provide training sessions in Finnish and also in English. We had 2 of them in English. We have a website, and also we have a help desk that supports users for creating or for collecting data into the Excel sheet. Once we have all the data available, we do some polishing with the data. Of course, there are some peculiarities, and we contact organizations to correct obvious mistakes and so on. But after this polishing session, we create a summary report. Last year, it was roughly 50 pages, a lot of detailed data, a lot of information, very useful for people who are working in IT in any university. And also we have a workshop. We will organize a workshop for discussing the results, and this will take place also not only in Finnish but also in English, so 2 separate workshops this year. But this is the way we're doing the generic results. But on top of this, we are actually providing all the detailed source data to the participants in a form that allows people to create all kinds of special graphs and comparison tables where universities can be picked up, so that you can really choose which university you want to compare yourself against. And this is probably the most useful part of the study, because this provides you access to the source data in a way that really makes it useful for your internal purposes, like showing the figures to your rector or to your president in my case, and then perhaps arguing that we should be having more money on this side, whereas on the other side we are spending too much. We should do some, say, data center consolidation, that kind of stuff. So I was already jumping into the benefits, but here they are in a one-slide format. First of all, it allows you to compare and understand your IT organization and, of course, then improve it in different ways. Typically, you really don't know how you compare relatively to others that are doing more or less the same kinds of things. I mean, universities in your peer group. And also, it's nice to know how different kinds of universities differ from each other in the way they are spending money or using using IT technology. But also, the process itself gives you more information about your IT environment. This is actually one of the very useful ways to use the process, because every year when you initiate the process of collecting data from your organization, you get all kinds of surprises, and these surprises are very good for you to understand. If you ask things the way you have done before, using your own questions, you will never discover new things. But since you are using this benchmarking template for doing this querying of data, it allows you actually to get more information than before. Okay, the second, and this is probably very important for many organizations today, because it seems that universities are trying to focus and trying to actually become more strategic in their thinking. This benchmarking activity allows you to understand how well you are executing your institution's strategy. Because if you know that there are other universities that are, for example, focusing more on network technology than you are, then you should understand that you will not be able to compete with those universities. And if it is within your university's strategy to do so, then you will have to change your way of spending money for the infrastructure. And here, again, I have had some very interesting findings from my own university, and I've been actually able to change some of the things that we have been doing in the past. So actually, it is a tool for executing your university's strategy using IT. So why Bencheit and why UNIS? Well, first of all, higher education is becoming an increasingly global business. And if you are only comparing you against your kind of peers within the neighborhood, or maybe even at the national level, it doesn't really provide you enough information to succeed globally. That's one thing. We have other benchmarking activities ongoing, like EduCourse, which is a nice way to do benchmarking. They have actually a very professional way of doing it. The challenge with that is that it's very much a US-style higher education institutions that they are focusing. So like things like funding or the way students behave, these are a bit different because of the differences in the universities. And therefore, if you are drawing metrics out of the benchmark from EduCourse, they are not directly comparable to what we are doing here in Europe. So you need to have the European flavor. Of course, you could kind of twist the EduCourse figures to get more European-focused figures, but then it really kind of makes the study less trustworthy, and sometimes you make mistakes using that kind of approach. So it's better to get data directly from your European peers in order to really understand how you are doing against them. And also there are commercial companies like Gartner doing benchmarking. The challenge with these approaches, well, there are several challenges. On one hand, of course, they are doing it professionally, but the challenge is that typically their templates are based on company information, so not universities, and therefore you don't get all the metrics that you would like to get. That's one thing. Secondly, they are fairly expensive. You can easily spend 10,000 euros for one study for one university, and that's really a lot of money if you are trying to do it for a country, for example. And of course, access to data is limited in the sense that the ownership of data remains within the company, and really you don't get to do these detailed comparisons as you would with our approach. So this is what you can get out of Bencheit, and then some results. These are just examples from my own point of view, so from Aalto University's point of view. For example, the share of IT costs from the total of costs at the university level. Aalto, we are spending roughly 5.2% of our money for IT, whereas within Finland, universities on the average are spending only 4.8%, and universities of applied science, which is actually a surprise to me, are spending a bit more. The fact that we are spending more money than the average universities is not alarming, because we have a lot of technical people within the university, which means that we are kind of allowed to spend more money on technology and on IT, on networks and so on. And also there is another university in Finland, X, I don't want to disclose the name here, who are spending even more. So from this point of view, we are actually doing things right. But if you are looking at the cost distribution there, you can see clearly big differences. In our case, our university is having a relatively large center for doing IT activities, and there are, of course, some distributed units. Our faculty is doing IT as well, but mostly things are being done in the IT center. Whereas in the University X, things are being done differently. And this is, of course, a question whether we are doing it in the right way. Are we close enough to our customers? And it seems that, according to this, we are not. And this is something that actually my president has raised up as one of the development areas. And she has now evidence that we probably should change things a bit. Right. Here you can see a number of universities spending money on different things, IT costs by service, and just pointing out some findings from this chart. Here, for example, University D is spending roughly double the amount of money compared to the others for their data center. And I think this is alarming for somebody who is running the IT organization in D, because really running data centers within the university is not really university core business. It's just something that will have to be done, but we really shouldn't spend too much money on that. So there is clearly room for improvement there. And also, looking at University C, for example, here, they are spending almost half of their budget for workstations, which is quite a lot. And probably, again, there is something that needs to be done within the organization. And then another example, costs per user. These are thousands of euros. So within Aalto, we are spending roughly 4,000 euros per personnel FTE, or 1.6 thousand euros per student FTE. And here, again, I would say that the fact that we're spending more than others is good news, because we are, well, four of our schools are actually technical schools, and they are expected to spend more money on, or we are expected to spend more money for their IT support than the average university. So here, again, I think this is something that confirms that we are doing things in the right way. So, to summarize, Bencheit is a benchmarking activity to compare IT metrics within European higher education institutions. There are several good reasons for joining the activity. You get benefits for the IT organization itself by improving your performance, by understanding where you are. You get benefits for the institution, for the university, by executing your strategy also through your IT. And typically, doing just peer comparisons or comparisons within your own country is not enough, given the fact that higher education is really a global business, and increasingly so. So, there's more information available on our website. If you're interested, you might still be able to participate this year's pilot for the international universities. And I'm also available today and tomorrow for any further questions.
Thank you very much for this presentation. Do you have any questions? We can only take 1 or 2 questions. Anyone? Yeah. Please use the microphone.
Do you plan on working with EDUCAUSE to integrate data, metadata, and data types between Bencheit and EDUCAUSE core data?
Yes, we actually have already started discussions so that some metrics, they are comparable, but others are not. And for those who are that are comparable, I think it makes sense to use the same kind of metadata.
Okay. Anyone else? Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
The next speaker is Dr. Martin Beck, now Deputy Director of what's the new name of UNI-C?
Yes, it's
DIC?
Yeah,
okay.
it's pronounced
okay.
DIC, whatever you think.
Okay. Well, the topic is SLAs.
Yes, thank you. Sure. Yeah, well, I'm daily manager of our NREN in Denmark, and where do I press here? The inspiration for this work I'm going to present now came some years ago when one of our, several actually of our university users, CTOs, came to us and said, we do not want best effort anymore, we want firm SLAs with firm uptime measurements in. And I said, okay, but it will not change anything because we will still manage the network in exactly the same way. They said, never mind, we promise our users specific SLAs with specific uptimes, we need you to do the same. And they said, okay, but what do you use my figures for? Do you ever calculate your SLA you can promise your user based on what I'm promising you? And they said, what do you mean? That's what I'm going to present you now. The idea is normally when we procure a service such as a van line or anything else really, there's a clause in the contract, section in the contract saying something about uptime. You calculate the availability and then the operator will, or the vendor will promise you that it will stay up at least, here it's 99%, normally it's 99.7% if it's a van line, okay? And what will happen actually if he doesn't do that, then he will suffer some penalties or whatever. But what does 99.7% actually mean? Does it mean that on the average it is up 99.7%? No. It means that only it is down less than 0.3%, and as long as it is that, then the supplier will hear no complaints from you. Okay, that's really what it means. And on the average, luckily, of course, our statistics have shown that it is up on the average 1.00% those services. So, yeah. And what do you then, in order to find out how to calculate on this, instead of regarding these guaranteed uptimes, 99.7% as a kind of probability, you need to see what is actually the probability of the line being up. So there's a relation between the guaranteed uptime and the actual performance. If we look at our network, in order to get some evidence for this, I looked at our network, it's sketched here, and there's a lot of single van lines in it, and we do monitoring of them. Of course, all the lines are here, and if we zoom into one of this is our monitoring system where we do the daily surveillance. And for all of these lines, we do a Linux-style ping, and if it is with no packet loss and response time less than a certain threshold, then it's green, and actually in the subsegment figures it's blue, but you'll not be disturbed by that. And well, and also if the packet loss is 100%, it's red, and something in between, it's yellow. And we only count uptime as the green dots, like this, for instance. Okay, you know, green is blue, but you will not be distracted. This is an average line. Normally this is doing a bit worse, and here you can see some yellow lines even, and this is completely rubbish, okay? Now, for every WAN connection, for every quarter, because our contracts with the vendors, they are quarter per quarter, we do a normal calculation of the downtime, like I said here, and that leaves us a picture like this, where you have all the WAN lines, and you can see quarter per quarter, that's the little rectangles there, quarter per quarter, how the performance is. All the green ones, now they're green, that is where it's acceptable, and the red ones are where there's an uptime bigger than what the vendor actually promised. Okay, that's how it looks. And all these, if we take them, it's actually 450 quarters, or you could say it's like having one line for 112 years. And if we do statistics on that, you can see that, for instance, here there's 85 quarters where there's an uptime or a downtime less than 0.02%, and so on. And if you look at the whole data set, we have some outliers. You see on the right over there, you see Fukushima and Chernobyl and other various other events. And you can say these are maybe, for some people, the interesting events. From a statistics point of view, you cannot use them for anything really. So we discard them, and you can always argue that's a bad practice. But anyhow, we discard them because they are usually, and I try to tell you here why, usually they do not, we cannot be sure that they reflect the actual performance of the supplier. They could be due to a lot of other factors that we have these outliers. Okay, so we discard them. Now we have something which looks like an exponential distribution. Now, if we turn to the textbook on exponential distributions, we have it here. You can see it is actually a distribution that has the property that it is memoryless. Memoryless meaning that it is what is the probability of you having 1 hour downtime is not dependent on whether you've already had 3 hours of downtime or not. Like, for instance, throwing a dice, if you do it all over again, the probability of getting a 6 next time is not dependent on whether you got 6 10 times in a row, actually. So it's memoryless. And you can show, that's also a textbook thing, that this probability distribution is actually only continuous one with that property, meaning that if you've already convinced yourself that this is a memoryless thing where your current downtime does not have anything to do with what happened in the history, then it must be exponentially distributed. Okay. So if we look at it in that way, you have the distribution here, and you can see that we have what the supplier is promising, 0.3%, what he's actually delivering on the average here, and that can also be used as a guess for the parameters of the distribution. And if we look at the cumulative distribution, we can see that if we have look at it where we have the guaranteed availability, we can see that actually on the average, every 16th quarter, there's a problem, okay, on the average. All the rest of the quarters is doing better, and for those few quarters above that threshold, he is doing worse. And now a few bold assumptions. I'll get to the point in a minute. Few bold assumptions, and we're ready to calculate our SLA. Now, if we assume the downtime is exponentially distributed, and we have an average mean time between failures of 16 quarters, which is the case here in my data set. It could be something else for your suppliers or your services. Then you can do a bit of math and find the relation between what he promises and what he delivers. The guaranteed uptime, that's a G, and what is his actually delivering, the performance, P. Okay? It's a linear relation like this. So if you go into the table and say, okay, if he promises 97%, then he actually, given this data set, he will deliver within his guarantee he will, on the average, deliver an uptime of 98.92%. Now, if we look at two services, I procured two services here, one with a guaranteed uptime of 99.7 and one with a guaranteed uptime of 99.5, then it is not correct just to multiply those two figures. I have to find the probabilities or the performances, multiply them, and convert back into what I can guarantee my user. Okay? Got that? Otherwise, it's too late. And the idea, I'll have a slide more about it. And you can apply that to other scenarios. Here we have 10 services where you have to have them all up in order to have good performance, or for the whole service to work. And you can see how you calculate here simply by multiplying them all together. And here, for instance, we have a parallel connection of two lines. That's usually what we do. We take two WAN lines and use them to connect some point, and then we promise the user that he will have 100% uptime. We do at least, but actually what we should be able to guarantee him is 99.99946%, okay? Which is, for all practical purposes, 100%, but nevertheless. Now we master the process. In this example, we have two services of 95%. We find the performances, we multiply them and convert back, and that gives actually 90.09%, which is different from what we would get if we just multiplied the two 95s out here, okay? So there's a difference. And similarly, if you do it in parallel, there's also a difference there. If, you can see do it yourself, there's a slight difference between doing it the right and the wrong way. And you can ask me, why bother with this method? Because if I'm actually taking 99.7% and doing it with the two methods, the only difference in my calculation is half a minute, or 46 seconds actually, over a whole quarter. So why bother with this method? Well, as I've just shown you in the previous examples, if you have larger downtimes or you have more complex situations, then actually your error gets significant. And there's another thing, and that's really my point here. Once you've understood this is exponentially distributed, then you can use it to calculate actually your mean time between failures if you promise something else. Let's look at it. In the Danish NREN, we promise 100% for places where we have full redundancy and 99.7% for places where we have one WAN line. If I now take two WAN lines, put them in series, I get 99.4%, okay? But what do I promise my user? If I go and promise my user 99.7%, despite what I can calculate over there, what will my mean time between failures be? It will be fail more often, naturally, but I can then find out what it will actually be. It will be that it will fail once a year instead of once every fourth year. And then I can, same thing here, I can calculate and get a guaranteed uptime, not so interesting. So now you're educated to do this yourselves at home. You can calculate what SLAs you can promise your users, or if you've already promised them something, you can check whether the contract you've made with your suppliers are adequate, and you can also calculate what penalties you, on the average, might be expected to pay or receive once you've promised something. And even you can use this to find out what would be the sufficient SLAs next time I do procurement. So my last slide here is really to prove the point that even management stuff can be nerdy. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very, very informative presentation and very quickly delivered. Do you have any questions? Yeah, could you pass the microphone? You're blazing fast.
Thanks, Martin. I think the one in 16 is a critical assumption in there, which you managed to derive from quite a lot of back history.
Yes.
Have you got any feeling for how common that figure is across the industry? So if I've got, if I know a conversion for one supplier, that supplier is willing to go out of contract once every 16, is it reasonable to assume that other suppliers are as well? Because if I happen to get a different supplier with a different risk profile, then I think your conversion table is going to be different.
Yes, you need to, when you are establishing a conversion table for your kind of industry, your situation, you need to have some kind of statistical material. But having said that, these data actually, these data here, there, they are both data transmission capacities and dark fibers, and they are from 6 or 7 vendors. Okay, so they are distributed, but there is another source of error which I have not discussed very much, and that is that there's a performance of the vendors, but on the other hand, once there's an event which does not cure itself, there's a kind of hysteresis or kind of a delay because, we have to wake up and do something. And this waking up time reflects that you can see the actual uptimes are below the curve up there. So that's an error sort of in the whole thing. So therefore, if you could somehow compensate for that, you could get closer to the actual performance of the supplier. And probably, hopefully, I would say for them also, because we don't pursue getting actually the penalties in all these cases normally, because we wouldn't have the case, because there are errors in our measurements. There are a lot of factors that renders that really difficult.
Any other questions? Any other questions? If anyone want to ask a question, then we have time. Martin has made sure for that. No? Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so the next presentation is also about a very current topic and interesting topic. That is the introduction of service management techniques to NRENs, which provide the ability to better manage and further expand the service portfolio in NRENs. And there's 2 presenters. The presentation is about the Brazilian NREN. So it's Leandro Marcos de Oliveira Guimaraes, okay, and Antonio Carlos Fernandez Nunes. Will you be both here? Okay. You can take the microphone.
Hello.
Fix your slides.
Okay.
First.
Thank you, Zenon, for the introduction. My name is Antonio Carlos Nunes. I am Service Management Director from RNP, Brazil. And good afternoon, everyone. Me and Leandro Guimarães will do this presentation about service management in Brazilian NREN, RNP. This is the agenda. We will see brief information about RNP, about RNP infrastructure, and so the service management in RNP and the conclusion. Well, RNP were founded in 1989 by an initiative of Ministry of Science and Technology from Brazil. We are a non-profit civil organization. We make association with universities, research centers, federal agencies, and technology companies. We plan and operate the educational network called IP Network, in Portuguese, Rede IP. Do you remember something? IP Network? Okay. And we developed advanced network services on behalf of educational, research, culture, and health. We provide support for national and international collaboration for specific user communities, testbed facilities for research and development in network distributed applications, and training ICT through extensive portfolio of courses. Today we have more than 800 connected institutions, including universities, research centers, technical schools, museums, libraries, and government agencies, and estimated than more than 3.5 million of users. We have two borders in the government's field, a political board and an administrative board. And so, this is our infrastructure. About our RNP infrastructure, nowadays we have an agreement with the local telco called Oi, brokered by a regulatory agency called in Brazil Anatel. And this agreement enables 3 and 10 gigabits per second, reaching 24 of 27 capitals, including the national capital. We have a hybrid architecture supporting routing IP and end-to-end circuit traffic. In the last mile, we have optical metropolitan network, usually built and owned by RNP, and we use 1 and or 10 gigabits Ethernet. So, about the service management in RNP. We were created and structured in 2009, 2010. So we have only two years and a half. We have the mission of strategically develops and manage the service portfolio and life cycle, providing the client's needs, aggregating value to them, aligned to the new technology tendencies and innovations. The service offered by RNP to their organizations, user organizations, are the result of innovation and prospecting process, analysis of scenarios, and tendencies activities with partners such as academy, the business sectors, and main worldwide academy networks. The main benefits of RNP services are to facilitate and promote communication, distance collaboration, and knowledge dissemination. We have all information about the services in our catalog service. This is our organizational chart. RNP are formed by a general director and 4 executive directors. We are below of the service and solution director. Here we are. This is the internal structure of the service management directory. We are formed by a service manager, service project manager, business support, ICT specialists and analysts, trainees. Yeah, the bad guy on the top, it's me. Well, the service catalog, we have a classification in all services. The classes are communication collaboration services, digital content delivery services, identity management services, strategic hosting and academic network support services. All services are in this category, and in communication collaboration, we have voice, VoIP over IP, telepresence, video conference, and web conference services. In the digital content delivery, we have Internet TV broadcast, on-demand video, video stream, and video classes services. In the identity management, we have an identity federation called CAFE, a PKI services, and in this year, we are modeling and structuring the EduRoam services. In the strategic hosting, we have an internet data center. Inside of them, we have a federal internet exchange. This is our service catalog. In this year, we are restructuring this catalog with a new version, more user-friendly, with emphasis in the service integration. Well, we are also integrated with other initiatives in the world, like ReFeds, NREN.net, EduGame, and EduROM. And we also member of Red Clara, the Latin American Corporation of Advanced Networks. Well, at this point, I will call Leandro Guimarães to present a view of the project to modeling and structuring the service lifecycle management. Leandro.
Hello. Thank you, Antonio. Thank you, Zenon. Good afternoon. Now I'll talk about service life cycle based on I2 and adjusted by RNP needs. During the organization change program that Antonio said, the need of process full documented, and it became very obvious. So we decided to develop and choose the best methodology that fits to RNP needs. So after some research, we decided that I2 fits very well to our needs. Now, how can we use or adjust I2 to RNP needs? Some manager with I2 formation were hired, including me. We verified that all I2 books, service strategy, service design, service transition, service operation, and continuous service improvement, which processes and documented could be used to help us. So, in a very macro vision, we segregate the I2 books into two micro processes, service management and service operation. Because we noticed that we got lots of process in a whole books of I2, and it's quite complicated to document it and describe it, all this process. So it's 22 processes at all. Although we segregate them into two macro processes, there are still 22 processes. The main problem is the amount of work that we have to do to document it and to detail until the tasks process. So we try to find some informations and some process that we could aggregate into some new process that we develop. So we got 4 processes and create the capacity management, another 4 and create service level management, 2 portfolio management, change management of 3 processes, and another 5 to monitoring in customer service management. Beside that, 2 processes went to another areas to detail and documented. It's IT financial management that were to financial area, and knowledge management that were to human resource area. Now you got 2 macro processes and 7 processes to detail. But this not make our job easier, because even we have to only, in service management, only 5 processes to detail, you got lots of sub-processes, and then you have to detail until tasks. So the first thing that we found is that how new service became enter into our service management lifecycle. So we found 4 inputs, major inputs. That's working groups, that I will detail a little later, customers, partners, governments. It runs our service lifecycle, and then we got new service or services improved. Tendency management. We knew that this is not a I2 process, but we feel that a lack of this process, that we need some proactive input to make our catalog better and bigger. The working group. RNP has an initiative to promote some work group, develop new services or products. This working group, it starts in year 1 that aim to develop a prototype that after some analyze, and it's specific for 7 minutes. Specific for to create a prototype to run into a university laboratory or a very small scale. The approved prototype, it's the input to year 2 that aim to create a pilot that's wider the number of the institutions. And all pilots approved, there are inputs to experimental service that are in the year 3. This experimental service, it's responsible to develop all bugs that were found and to increase the number of institutions also. And the experimental service that were approved, they are input to service modeling. The service portfolio management, it's where we got all these inputs and creating modeling all the service to create a new service or improved service. The service operation and customer service is another group of process that we are aggregate from the I2 books and create change management and monitoring and customer service management. These two processes are being detailed in this year. We are planning to finish the end of this year, and the implementation of all process is planning to 2013. Foreseeing the change management, we see that we have all users and administrations to registry, planning, and authorization a change, because we knew that if everything is documented, fully documented, and agreed with all parts, it's less dangerous to the users, and the downtime is smaller. The part of customer service management, the service desk, the RNP service desk is not responsible to contact and talk with final users. The final users are responsible to, the final users contact the local responsible that try to solve the problem. If they can't solve the problem, contact service desk from RNP. Service desk try to solve the problem. If it's not possible, service desk contact IT team from RNP. If IT team is not responsible or not get to solve the problem, contact the partners and help us God. So, try to make this presentation quick. This is introduce the service management. The full paper are available in the TNC page. These are our contacts, our page, service page, Twitter, follow us. We brought also a folder that explains a little more who is an RNP and what's services, security, research and development.
Thank you very much, both of you. Thank you for delivering very quickly also. Are there any questions about these twofold presentation? No one? I think everything is clear then.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the last presentation is about NetPlus, which is the new initiative by Internet2, and it will be presented by the newly appointed Senior Vice President, Dr. Shelton Wagner. Right.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No problem. Good afternoon, everyone. Let's get this presentation up here. That's all right. We'll find it. Yeah. There it is. So we've been talking today a lot about individual IT service management strategies, ITIL, metrics. I think they go together really nicely. One of the challenges we're going to have is matching those two efforts with cloud services, because many of the traditional models don't work well in a cloud environment. And figuring out how we're going to blend them is part of what NetPlus is all about. There's a lot of content here. I'd encourage you to download the slides and email me with questions. My background is both private sector and higher education CIO work. The last 10 years or 9 years I've been at Berkeley. I was the CIO there until Friday. I am now the Vice President at Internet2 as of yesterday or Saturday or something. Don't know what time zone I'm in, because every time I open my eyes it's still daylight here, so I'm not sure. Not sure what day it is. But the core of what NetPlus is started with CIOs in the United States in the research universities several years ago, getting together to discuss the fact that we were continuing to do things on our own that we must do collaboratively, and we must influence the commercial vendors to do collaboratively. So how were we going to do that? We weren't terribly functional, and the commercial vendors weren't terribly functional. Dr. Brad Wheeler from the University, from Indiana University, and I put a paper together in EDUCAUSE a number of years ago that described this as above campus services, that we had to get out of our own local services and really be above the campus. But when you think about IT, the process that we go through within higher ed is pretty simple. We innovate something, or somebody identifies something that's been innovative, we adopt it, and then we want to consume it. We use it at an individual department or an individual PI. Then the IT department gets involved and everything goes wrong, right? Slows down, doesn't get deployed right, it stops being as helpful or as useful as it was. Somebody else can do it better, faster, cheaper. I'm sure all the NRENs and the campuses in the European Union don't have that problem, but in the United States it's reasonably common. But the real issue here is this cycle that we have been in for a generation of technologists and consumers of technology is not effective and productive in a world of services. It is in a world of constrained capital, right? When you have to buy and build big things, there's a reason this model worked, because we had to find ways to buy those things cheaper. So we would develop standards, right? We'd find a way to do this and aggregate that demand, so when we bought it, we'd say, this is great, we'd declare victory and say, we did it cheaper. But the value isn't in the price. And we've seen that over and over in the presentations and in this morning's plenary from Gardner about how do we do this in a way that's really going to add value. And value is now about the individuals in the room individually rather than just about the institution. I don't know if Marx is the appropriate economic model there, but I do think we need to be rethinking things. So we often see these mission statements or vision statements from procurement organizations or administrative organizations that say, we're going to do this institution-wide. And you could say, we're going to do it NREN-wide, or we're going to do this as a collaborative. The problem is, when you get to the end, what is of value to those departments or those institutions is not of value to you as an individual or to the individual departments that want to use the services. The models are not aligned. And the approach is very much been a response to legislative, legal requirements around procurement processes, feeding into the sales processes. The whole ecosystem has been built around this. But when you think about, as we now move to a cloud model, there's a couple of things that are going on simultaneously that I think are going to be very disruptive and basically break many of these existing models. And doing it individually is really not the way to go. So when you think about, well, what's really going to break? Well, everything. That's a good thing, actually. Chaos creates good opportunity for us. But the funding models and the supply chain models for higher education are under enormous attack globally. We can't keep raising tuitions. The funding models from the governments are all under attack. There's less funding available. Then you move into pedagogy, and finally we're seeing pedagogy moving into new markets by using technology, and that's beginning to erode and disrupt the legacy approaches. Globalization, we've heard today, it's massive, and it's not one-directional, it's many-directional. And then, of course, all this is happening in the context of cloud computing occurring, which is, one of these major once-in-a-decade shifts in the way we use and consume technology. So in the United States, we've always had multiple funding layers. We have, at a research university, you've got state funding and federal funding and global funding, and a part of that was student funding. And these all came from various research initiatives. But there isn't a single layer of this stack of funding that isn't broken right now. Right? The way students receive funding used to be from financial aid. But financial aid came from governments or philanthropy that are breaking. Commercial contracts used to be limited in certain ways, and now there's very large commercial contracts with universities. Federal grants for research are now partitioned out to multiple institutions. It's very rare for a large grant to go to one institution. It goes to an institution and then is sub-awarded to multiple institutions. And of course, those aren't local either. And then there's this problem, which is, we're really shifting from the idea of owning our capital and being able to manage the credit associated with that capital as a way to, more or less, all of your financial officers float money. They use the capital that they get from the government or from federal institutions, and they figure out ways to maximize that capital, including IT, right? You buy as much as you can, the grants come through, we're going to buy all that as capital one time, and then we'll amortize that across many things. But if we're shifting now to having to pay as we go, it's a new financial model that many institutions aren't really prepared for, particularly PIs and our granting agencies that are still making us only use those funds to buy capital. Well, IT is all about services now, it's not about capital. So how are we gonna make that work? Now, the personal supply chain concept is also here. The individual person is at the center of the supply chain now of higher education, not the institution, right? It's not about, the institution still controls the certificate or the degree, but all the other pieces of education are now being driven by an individual who can consume a class from one institution, a lecture from another, go on to online services for individual pieces anywhere in the world. And it is an online world. Right? We know that education is being distributed in new ways. I think that the graph in the middle, which is interesting, is about in the United States, online-only enrollment. So people that are only enrolling in online institutions. It's not that there's growth, it's the slope of the growth that's interesting. Right? I don't know if it can continue to go more vertical than it already is, but you look at something like Khan Academy. How many people have used Khan Academy? Do you know what Khan Academy is? So about 20% of the audience. Khan Academy is basically one guy with a whiteboard and a pen. And he does individual learning modules, about 10 minutes apiece, 130 million views. He's having them translated into languages all over as our speaker this morning said, the other Theristans. Right? He's having them translated into languages all over the world because 10 minutes of learning is just-in-time learning. Lots of people need to use those. And you say, well, that's not research education. No, but it's filling a need. And we're seeing those needs filled in all kinds of new ways. And then when we talk about the global market, it's many-directional, right? Technion from Israel is opening a major campus in the middle of New York City. Right? We've got US campuses opening overseas, international campuses opening in the United States. I don't know that the educational market, and we've heard it from a couple other speakers here today, is going to be able to preserve the concept of local very much longer. Right? It really is. The research is already global. The education is going to be global. And we're one of the last sectors, industrial sectors, to actually be faced with that level of globalization. Right? Many others have already been there. Certainly you've seen manufacturing, and in Iceland we can say finance has been globalized in many ways, and not necessarily to our benefit. And then the ubiquitous startup model. What's very interesting about this is in the past, startups had to seek out large amounts of capital from venture capitalists before they would start their initiatives. They can now start companies. EVE Online could start today and have access to 1 million servers without spending a dime of capital. Because of the expansion of cloud services, it's enabling new companies to get started very, very quickly, which means the speed of evolution of these new options is coming at us faster than ever before. I think this chart's interesting. These little blobs up here are the data centers for Amazon, right? And they're spreading like measles all over the globe. There's already Amazon in Latin America now that didn't show up on this chart. Amazon stopped publishing where all their data centers were 2 years ago. So this chart is massively out of date because 2 years in Amazon's life is a very long time. But it doesn't explain, okay, so all that's going on, what are we going to do about it, right? We've got to change some things. So this is about IT and your departments and your organizations. Do we have universities in the room? Some individual campuses? How many people have actually restructured your IT departments? Has anybody restructured for the cloud yet? I mean, we heard it this morning that we need to be thinking about it, but I would argue we're actually the biggest problem. IT isn't moving fast enough to figure out how it's going to work in the cloud, and as a result, we're going to get left behind. So that's what Net Plus Services is. It's to begin taking these services and prevent us from getting pulled apart by ourselves, by the individual vendors. It's a way to bring the NRENs and the campuses together so that we can, in fact, create those standards and those models. The CIOs said these are the things that they need, right? So I'm not sure exactly if this is the right list, but 2 years ago, this is what they came up with. Let's just start here. Give me these as a global service so that we can begin to move things above the campus. So our approach is pretty straightforward, right? We're not going to the vendors and saying, we'd like to buy that service. We're taking campuses and bringing together a group of campuses and the provider of a service to those campuses and saying, we want to build you a new business model. Now, if you go to the company, if you go to, we'll use Cisco just because they've been such a great whipping boy today. If you go to Cisco and say, we really want to work with you, and what we mean by that is we want to build a new business model for you. I don't know if John Chambers is going to be interested. But they all are going to have to be because their business models were based on an operating paradigm that is not going to work in a cloud future, right? You're seeing the cloud companies moving really, really quickly, but their business models also need help because this is hard to admit, but it's true. We are terrible to do business with. Higher education is the worst vertical to work with if you're in the sales business or you're trying to sell into higher education. We take forever to make decisions. We need to kick every tire every time. We look at things for months and months and months. When we finally do decide, then we go through these very onerous procurement processes and RFPs with all the restrictions. And in the very end, we buy things that we don't buy very often. So we'll buy it and then we try to make it last forever. That's not a very good process for generating lots of revenue. So our goal is not to coordinate from a cooperation perspective. Our goal is to do formal collaboration for periods of time around specific activities so that we can get the pace moving faster. Because we all know that we do collaborate a lot, but collaboration and speed don't go together very well. Part of what Net Plus then is all about how we're going to get to speed. So does anybody know what this is? That is a computer. Yeah, because of course, when Amazon builds computers now, they're not building little blade servers, right? You're building huge containers, right, that are self-contained, And they're using them like giant modules in a giant rack, right? Think about a blade server that already has a couple 100,000 cores in it that you just slip into your larger models of data centers. I mean, we're talking scale like none of us have ever dealt with before. And if we think we can do it better, faster, cheaper, more creatively, more innovatively, we are going to be spinning our wheels and spending monies in ways we don't need to. But if we can collaborate with these guys, we can take advantage of the growth they're seeing, right? I like this chart even though it's not presented correctly, because it's a year-over-year chart showing the number of objects stored in Amazon S3 from 2006 through 2011. And then it shows you in 2011, right, that they went from 762 billion objects to 900 billion objects in 90 days, right? So that's more growth than they saw in the first 5 years combined, and it continues to accelerate. So that's the kind of growth we need, and that's the kind of growth we're talking about. So here's what Net Plus is. Let's get to the brass tacks so we can get to some questions. Net Plus is basically a process. It's a funnel. You saw ITIL. What we're doing with Net Plus is saying we know that we have lots of research activities going on. Many of them create services on our campus. You've seen some of the presentations here. The cloud storage, file sender, various projects that started in our NRENs or in our institutions as a research activity. We then move it to a service validation phase to say, all right, let's get some of the institutions that are actually interested in using it or are already running it and say, how do we make that a higher education-wide service? What are the things that it's going to take to eliminate all the costs around it, the contracting costs, the sales costs, the legal costs, everything that we can, so that we can make it easily consumable. Then you move it into an early adopter phase that allows more campuses to join who haven't been involved in the past but want to try it and want to make sure it's actually pre-production, it's really ready to go. Now that doesn't mean we aren't already running it. A lot of these things are running in lots of places, but again, they're running as one-off. They're running under individual contracts. They're running under individual terms. They have a different approach. So we're trying to say by the time it gets to general availability, it should be a click-through. You should be able to just consume that service at an individual level for your institution with no delays. So here's what we've done in the spring of this year. These are the providers that we're working with in the various stages that they're at. The red ones are the ones that were newly announced. We announced Box in the fall as one of the first ones, and that is now in general availability. Box is a nice example because we created a master contract with Box and Internet 2 as the NREN for the United States. And then we have client agreements, customer agreements with all of the campuses that we already do business with the campus and Internet 2. So they were able to go through a much higher or streamlined process for acquisition of the Box service than the previous models would have allowed them to do. And so we're able to get much faster adoption. So we went from 4 schools working together to 8 in that model. Then we had the early adopters work through a lot of the issues, make sure that federated identity works, provisioning works, the things that we wanted to have in the product. We worked with them and the company to make sure that happened. And then when we went to general availability, we had over 200 schools sign up, evaluate it. We had them in trials, and many of those are now just converting into production customers. All in the span of weeks or months as opposed to our past practice of very long. And these are, you've seen these elsewhere. These are the different kinds of services. So that metric was, where are they in their life cycle? This is the type of things that they are, so that it's a multi-dimensional assessment. And we will have services in all of these. Other is interesting in that Course Load McGraw-Hill is an e-text program to replace paper textbooks for students. It's principally a business model and accessibility and evaluation to make sure that if people want to consume e-texts, we're not simply replacing the purchasing model of a book with the purchasing model of an electronic book. There's a lot of costs in that supply chain that exists for books today. And oh, by the way, many people don't like the fact that we're messing with their business model and their supply chain, like the bookstores. Right? They're not particularly happy that we're changing things. The publishers, They're not particularly happy that we're changing things. And some of my faculty, who are authors of these texts at Berkeley, are not particularly happy that we're changing things. Our goal isn't to try to get it right out of the gate. Our goal is to influence the market over time by having a collaborative activity where we can do these things faster and faster. So that's where we have lots of these going on. We also have, you saw EVO up here and DuraSpace. EVO was created at Caltech. DuraSpace is a collaborative activity from many universities, both nationally and internationally within the US. Then we have a different attribute to consider. So you saw that we had a workflow, where are they in their life cycle? Then the type of service in terms of the categories that we would see. Then this is a different way to look at it. Is the service we're talking about designed specifically by the Internet 2 community? Are they customizing and creating an offering that really is just for higher education? Or is it just better terms? Is it a product that is already offered to higher education and we need to get better terms? And I don't mean just better price, I mean better terms, so that it's really not just a legacy software contract that's been slapped together to add the word services into. But really, is it something that's much better from a terms? Or is it just better discounting? Because we are, in fact, aggregating and they already have the terms we want and it's already tuned to what we need. Then we can do the discounting. Or is it with ourselves? Is it a community service that one of us in the room, another NREN internationally, a US NREN, a regional in the United States, a campus in the United States, is exposing to offer as a service to all of us? That's a community offering, and we approach those a little bit differently, but they're net plus services as well. They can be exposed and consumed by all of us. So with that in mind, you then categorize each of the services into that tier. And this helps us identify how much legal costs are we going to have for those, how much marketing costs are there going to be, how are we going to engage the different providers, and who has responsibility to move them forward. So all of these services now that I've outlined are massive in their impact for the institutions that were interested in them. In the case of Box, one of the things we did with Box is, of course, we worked with them to customize the service, and we also moved them over onto the Internet 2 backbone. So that instead of we already own the network. So why would we want the traffic going over the commodity internet from a campus to Box, back over the commodity internet, back to the campus, when a lot of the idea of Box is for two institutions to be able to collaborate together? They're already on the Internet 2 network. So we worked with them on that. It turned out we hadn't even started the program yet when we put up the first connection, and they started seeing all this traffic going back and forth. Wait a minute, we don't have any contracts with anybody yet. How's that possible? Because they're consumer services. People are clicking through and using these things. Everybody's using Dropbox, right? Well, we talked to Dropbox. We looked at Dropbox. But Dropbox doesn't offer federated identity, doesn't have logging, doesn't have security, didn't meet the requirements that we needed as a community, so we worked with Box. As a result, we were able to see immediate benefit for all of the interested parties. And Box, by creating a custom service for us, Box was able to drive the cost down by 90% off of what they were charging before we got together with them to do this program. They win because their costs go down. We win because we get the services that we need. You heard it before, win-win. It's very possible, but we have to change. The institutions have to change. The providers have to change. So these are up on the deck for you to look at. These are basically just quick snapshots. We're doing something with Amazon through a regional. The regional network for California is called Scenic. There's an aggregation there. CenturyLink does virtual data center services. This is the eText pilot I was talking about, which was interesting in that after we announced this, we were contacted by other publishers who wouldn't work with us before, who said, "Why are you working with them? You didn't give us a chance." I said, "Well, we did talk to you and you weren't interested." "Well, we didn't know this is what you meant." Right? Well, what they really mean is, oh, wait a minute, if we're not in, does that mean we're out? And the answer for all of us should be yes. I was the one that asked the question about Gartner this morning when I said, so what you're saying to us is if we want Gartner to use federated identity, we all need to unsubscribe to Gartner. Unless we work together, right? If we do not stand together, we will surely hang alone. We have to find a way to influence the commercial market now during this period of chaos because we simply don't have the margins or the volume to justify the commercial entities doing independent R&D on our behalf to create services for us. We have to bring them the business models and the services and the roadmap and work with them now during this period of chaos, because once the cloud market solidifies in new ways, higher ed will again be left on the outside, and we will have a whole commercial market that doesn't really meet our needs. So it's really important that globally, every one of our nations, NRENs, and those institutions begin to collaborate and share our information and work together so that we can influence these providers globally. And NetPlus is prepared to work with any other regional or any other national network anywhere internationally so that we can share these and collaborate with you to make sure that we're not duplicating effort. Because again, that adds costs that we don't want to be on either side. Just a few others here. You've got Evo, which is on video collaboration. Desire to Learn is capture, lecture capture. And I think one of the things that's most interesting about all of these is they were brought to us not by Internet 2 saying, we're going to go talk to these people. These are the providers that the vendors said, the members said, we are using in large numbers. We like these services. We want to improve upon them. We want to bring it together as a NetPlus service and make it better with you. We are serving as that neutral third party so that we can bring the folks together to solve the problem. Okay, so I think the essence of this is really we can do more. We can serve the mission of our institutions in far more favorable terms if we don't repeat the ERP era of the past, if we don't allow ourselves to wait and just negotiate individually. By the way, one of the reasons we do that is we all think we're special. We can get that deal from IBM, from Cisco, from HP. We're just not that special, I'm sorry to say. Coming from an American, that's unusual, huh? We all think we're special, but we aren't. And we can really make a change here if we work together on this. So I think that left us for time for a few questions.
Thank you for this very strong and very informative presentation. Please raise your hands for any questions you may have. Let's start from here.
Thank you for the presentation. It was an excellent one. I have a question related to the European context. I mean, in the US, this works well, it seems. But what about the European limitations, and how would you propose to work with them? I'm thinking about the procurement law, for example, that requires us to have open tendering processes for these services, and also the limitation to keep certain type of data within the limits of the Europe, so we couldn't use US-based services for those cases. So how to work with these?
Two different issues. So first is I'll put our dysfunctional procurement process up against your dysfunctional procurement process any day. I don't think Europe has a lock on doing things challenged in the procurement world. It's more a matter of recognizing that these aren't exclusive. So people will be able to choose providers. You can still have your same procurement process, but unlimited choice is not of value if it results in unlimited cost. I often say at Berkeley, the worst thing I ever get is a donation, because I get one of everything ever invented, and then I have to run it. That's very expensive. We can have the gladiator wars of improved service level coordinated so that by the time they get to you for choice, you're actually choosing from things that have already been pre-vetted and have already been valued and have already been confirmed as being NetPlus, or in this case with Europe, similar challenges. On the flip side, related to data, most of my universities ask if there's any way if we can store our data in the UK or in the European Union anyway. We recognize there's some concerns around the Patriot Act. I think most of those are considerably overblown, particularly given the fact, for example, with Box, it's 256-bit encrypted in transit and at rest. Box, they're storing in some locations in the US as just dumb storage. Yes, I mean, the NSA really wants the data. I suppose they can try to run it through a few supercomputers and get access to it. But so I think many of the concerns are overblown, but that doesn't prevent the politicians from passing laws that prevent us from doing logical things. So I think we need to work on changing some of the rules. But I think for the most part, what we're seeing is that we can work around the rules to meet the spirit and the intent without getting bogged down in some of the past practices. But the procurement piece is a huge cost on both sides that we need to find a way to reduce that cost. Yes, in the back.
Much thoroughly enjoyed that. One very simple question for you. Is this self-sustaining, and if so, how?
Is it self-sustaining? We try to make sure we make no money on anything, but we make it up in volume. You know, our goal isn't to make money. We're not trying to generate lots of revenue for Net Plus. We're passing those savings on to the institutions, the members. So the sustainability of it is really based on the fact that the member institutions are driving the subscriptions based on what they want, and then we work with the provider to make sure that our costs in doing so are covered. But we run far more frugally as a common entity than, you know, the sales forces of all of these companies run. If I take the cost of sales away from a provider, I can do the same activity through Net Plus for 1/100th the cost that the provider would have in trying to deploy a sales force to higher education in the US. So it's very sustainable from that regard, because we can still generate the savings. You saw in Box we generated 90% savings. Box is getting the benefits without having to expend the resources, and so all the money goes straight to the service instead of to all these other general administrative, sales, you know, procurement costs that don't add value. Now, in the old days when you were buying lots of things with lots of capital, that may have made sense because your risk profile was very high. But as we move to adopt services much faster, we've got to get rid of all of those for the time span as much as the cost, because I would expect that we will adopt these much faster than we ever have in the past. Over here. How are we doing? Give you some more.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. Really enjoyed that. You touched briefly on the point on information management and security. Is that something that is concerning you? Are you letting the universities to deal with it directly with the providers, or is Internet 2 breaking something in between? How are you managing that?
For all of the, if you think about the service validation phase, we bring together the chief security officers of those universities, the campus councils from those universities, so that they're actually developing the review protocol and the contract together as a group. So a colleague of mine, actually John Norman from Cambridge, from JISC, says collaboration is, 2 + 2 = 3, right? Getting all those people together takes effort and time, and you don't necessarily get huge payoff. But if my 2 gives me 3 back, it was worth it. So bringing all those chief security officers together and saying, we're going to evaluate the security of this provider and ensure that they're meeting the minimum requirements that we have as higher ed. When that group does that, then I have to question, so let's say Stanford and Chicago, New York, Cambridge, and ETH got together and did that. Does Berkeley need to again do it? Or if we know what they're doing and it's an open review, can we accept that that process was good, and then Berkeley will focus on doing a review with another group for another provider? So that's where we're going. We're basically trying to leverage the security reviews that we're all having to do, and we're doing over and over and over across all of higher education for the same vendor who then has to respond over and over and over. You take all those costs out, but you still do it, and you do it consistently, I think we can get there. Okay. Anything else? Yes?
You're disrupting the business models of the vendors, but at the same time, you're also disrupting the workflow and the way a university works, because your Net Plus is end-user geared services, which impact directly on every single student, every single employee, every single professor in a university.
Yes?
Could you comment on what the pitfalls and what the end goal is for that?
Well, the biggest pitfall is trying to tell anybody in higher ed what to do is a waste of time, right? Yeah. So I don't intend for any CIO to be a gatekeeper of what's okay and what isn't. But knowing that you are going and clicking through on a click-through that says, yes, I'm giving away all my rights and I don't care, but I want to use your service, is probably not to the interest of you or the institution. So if you subscribe as an institution, as a whole, with a common license for everyone, you're going to have a better quality license, and you're going to eliminate all the costs and risks of everybody doing it on their own, whether they're using it or not. So that's part of the license and the pricing model, right? it isn't that I'm paying for everybody that isn't using it. I'm paying a lower price knowing that some people aren't going to use it, but I eliminate all the cost of the licensing model by just setting up a common license. So I think that we need to remember that individual consumers are always going to drive, and in our case that's faculty, students, graduate students are always going to drive the demand. But that doesn't mean they want unlimited choice either. They'd kind of like some constrained choice that says which things are going to work in our environment. Right? So if you can expect that you're going to do both, you're going to have to live with some of the chaos, but you're going to create, options for people that you already have the licenses done, you already have the commitments done. You're going to save a lot in both your support costs and your management costs over time that you otherwise are going to have imposed upon you whether you know it or not. But that doesn't mean you still can't tell them what they're going to do. But you're still short-circuiting all the organizational processes they have set up. And I'm not saying that's a stupid thing. I kind of like that, but... No, I've been told it's a stupid thing. They've been telling me it's quite stupid. But I think more to the point, what makes us think, as technologists, who are supposed to be adept at change, what makes us think we can sit back and agree with everybody who is resisting the change that we shouldn't change? It's ludicrous. Funding models are changing. The pedagogy is changing. Globalization in higher ed is changing. The technology is changing. And we're going to sit around with our arms crossed and say, yeah, we better not do this because it's going to cause people to have to change. That change it's happening, and acknowledging it is a hard thing to do. But if we don't do it as a community, the technologists are going to end up cleaning up the mess after the fact. Right? We'll end up being IT janitors instead of institutional leaders, and that's not where we need to be. Right? Because all of those things that I talked about change happening, none of them happen without IT. So we need to be there at the table and not on the sidelines. And I think we're out of time. Last question in the back.
Short question because we're out of time and we're already going into the break. Yeah.
Okay. Does the microphone work?
Yes, it is.
So. My question is about the delivery process. Can you tell a little bit about that? Because normally you're used to pull your credit card to buy cloud services.
Yeah.
And how does that work if I want to buy cloud service via Net Plus?
Institutions add a subscription to a service at the institutional level with an amendment, basically an appendix to their existing relationship with the NREN. So you'll add the box amendment to your Internet 2 subscription. You'll add another service to your subscription. In the case of Box, for example, we eliminated all the various options and there's only tiers. It's based on the size of your institution and that's it. We're taking all the decision criteria away from everybody having to run credit cards and just passing that through straight as service benefit. Okay. So that's another presentation that I didn't have time for today. But basically, we have to remove many of the steps that we go through today so that we can accelerate the adoption process. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And thanks to all the presenters for a very meaningful set of presentations.